Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which is designed to introduce you all to the 2013 CCA Data Collection Process and Systems. My name is Katie Zabak, and before I introduce the content for today's webinar and my colleagues, I'd like to share with you some basic webinar housekeeping items. First, due to the large response, participants will be muted for much of the presentation today. We may try to unmute people so that they can ask individual questions. And we do plan to pause throughout the presentation to allow people to ask questions. You can ask those questions in a number of ways. First, we ask you to raise your hand, which would allow us to unmute your line. Additionally, you can also use the Q&A chat box, which we'll be monitoring throughout the presentation. To get to the Q&A chat box, you will need to open the question mark, which you will see on the upper right corner of your screen, and that will give you the chat box. Just to kind of let everybody know, we are going to have designated questions at the end of the webinar, and we hope to get to everybody's questions today, but if we don't, we will certainly follow up with each of you and answer those questions offline if we're not able to do it in this public space. And then finally, if there are difficulties with the webinar that you're running into, you can contact Chris Ott here at SHIO, and he can help connect you. His name or his email address is cott@shio.org, and you can also always contact WebEx customer support at 866-229-3239. So first I want to start out by giving you an overview of the presentation that we are going to go through today. SHIO is really looking forward to working with all of you again this year who reported last year, and also meeting those new people who will be part of this process this year. So the first thing that I'm going to do is talk about last year's success, and also define the roles and give you some information on customer service. Then I'm going to turn it over to Michael Baumgartner from CCA, and he's going to go through the changes that were made to the actual common completion metrics this year. We tried to keep those changes minimal and just to be responding to each of your needs, so he'll be reviewing those. And then probably the bulk of our webinar today will be my colleague here at SHIO, John Wiegand, is going to go through the system and actually show you a demo of how you might use the system and how to navigate through the online system. So let's go ahead and start by talking about last year. I think that we had an excellent data collection process or data collection cycle last year. The map that you see up illustrates the total number of states that reported last year, and you can see that there were 27 states that reported data to CCA last year. 6 of those states that are depicted in red reported at the state level only, and what's really notable is that 21 states reported institutional level data for a total of 743 institutions that reported. So you're in good company this year. Now I just want to go ahead and move on to the roles. We have a number of different roles. This webinar in particular is geared towards those who will be operators, so those who will be supporting your state key holder. The key holder is really the point person for each of your states. They're the ones who are going to manage the CCA data collection process at the state level, and they're really your key point of contact if you have questions about what your state is choosing to do as you report information. We also allow key holders to designate people to help them. So a key holder can designate an operator who will have the ability to upload data into the system and who will have the ability to view data that's been uploaded into the system. A key holder might also define a designated key holder, and this designated key holder just has additional permissions to approve the data in the system. So if the key holder at the state level feels that there is somebody who is better suited to approve a certain set of data for one entity or maybe even statewide data, they are able to designate that role to an individual to take care of that. So hopefully that provides a broad overview of the roles that we offer or that we provide within the system. And I think that I want everybody to know that today towards our operators and potentially our designated key holders. I know that we have a number of state agency key holders who are on the phone. If you're a state key holder and you want to get additional information about how to manage your operators and how to manage your organizations within your state, you can always view last week's webinar, and there's an extensive section that goes over these functions in the user guide. So we encourage you to look at that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael Baumgartner, who's going to talk to us about the changes in the CCA metrics.
Oh, good afternoon. This is Mike, and welcome all to the call. And we're glad that you're attending and learning about the changes that we've made. I do see one slide here that Katie hadn't gotten to that will be available whenever this is online as well. But I'm going to jump over that now and move into the changes for this year in the metrics in the collection. As Katie mentioned earlier, we have tried to keep the changes to a minimum. In fact, I think that we're getting to a point where there won't be many changes, particularly major changes going forward. I think that we're getting close and we're aligning as much as we can with some of the other collection processes going on, which is helpful to you and to other organizations that are looking at some of the metrics as well. So the major change for this year is that we are moving up to cohorts by 2 years rather than 1. So, for instance, as you can see, if we used fall 2007 in last year's submission, we're going to jump to fall 2009 this year. And we are trying to make the metrics more relevant to you at the states and at your campuses, and having them as old as they have been makes them less relevant, particularly as you start to implement changes. Now, we're still not going to be able to get into the real-time stuff that you can do at your campuses, but this should be quite an improvement overall. So this is a big change that you need to keep in mind. Most of the rest of the changes are by way of clarification rather than anything big. The first one, for instance, is quite small. In the Outcome 1 measure, the bachelor's degrees that are awarded by 2-year institutions should be reported within the bachelor's degree category. Previously, we had labeled that category 4-year institutions, and I have some concerns that people weren't putting the data in then because we had labeled it that way, so just changing that label. Second, for Outcome 2, because we're skipping a cohort year, the 200% graduation rates for bachelor's degrees can't be collected or reported for everyone. Right? Some may be able to do that, but in general, I don't think they're going to be able to. So what we've done is delay that 200% reporting until next year. So the cohort will stay the same next year, but we'll collect the cohort for which we're collecting 200% next year will be the same as this year's bachelor's degree seeking cohort. For Outcome 3, we are broadening and clarifying that transfers can be followed to any 4-year institution inside or outside of state. We had a number of states that have quite a few students transferring out of their state based on geography or size or availability of other institutions within the state, and they asked us to broaden the way we've been collecting that, so we're doing that. Now, that poses a problem for some states that don't have a means of collecting that. They may just have a longitudinal data system within the state or are working campus by campus. So if you're not able to follow the students out into any institution outside the state, well, we'd like to make sure that you note that in your submission. On outcome 4, we want to clarify that remedial courses should be included in credits and time to degree. I know that many of you are in SREB states, and that is the way that the SREB is collecting that information. Because we have so many that are overlapping, I decided that we should just make sure that everybody's on the same page if they weren't. So those should be included in credits and time to degree. And we also want to clarify some informal guidance that we've been giving in the past, but that keeps coming up, that students who've stopped out for 5 or more years should be excluded from the calculations. So if you can't see any indication that they've enrolled anywhere for a 5-year period, then just exclude them from credits and time to degree. On progress 1 and 2, our remediation enrollment and completion metrics, we are clarifying that first-time students who enrolled in remedial courses in the summer before fall entry should be included in the progress 1 and 2 cohorts. So if you were going to include them in the fall cohort and they did start courses, a bridge program, or some other course to take care of remedial issues before they start in the fall, as long as you've classified them as fall starters, they should be in that fall cohort as remediation students, students who started in developmental ed. If they started in June or some point where your state would not recognize them as starting in the fall, then they wouldn't be. But otherwise, we will include them in the fall cohort. In progress 3 and 4 metrics, we are including remedial students as disaggregation categories, as defined in the metrics guide. In progress 5, we are splitting apart the transferred and graduated column so that we have retained, transferred, and graduated collected separately. And students need to be reported according to the outcome they achieved first. And we didn't have that clear last year. So it was possible to double count students who transferred and graduated, or graduated and transferred in that order. So we want you to report students according to the first outcome that they achieved. So if they graduated first and then transferred, they should be in the graduated column. Progress 6, simply separating the 4-year very high research campuses from other 4-year campuses. And then another change at the state level, we are working to line up with the access to success metrics, and this also makes sense logically to avoid double counting. At the state level, transfer students should be defined as students coming from out of state or from private institutions within the state, transferring to a public institution, or students moving from one program level to another. That way we don't have students transferring from 4-year institutions, for instance, who are classified as both beginning at one and transfer at another at the state level, and double counting that way. At the campus level, nothing will change, but at the state level, we're working to avoid that duplication. So I will turn this over to, I believe, John at this point.
Okay, I'm here, and I guess I'm now the presenter, so that's good. So I'll talk a little bit about the technical changes, and then we'll demo how the system works from the perspective of an operator. So last year, those of you who participated, and I wish I knew how many, but I assume quite a number of you participated last year, the system was very worksheet-centric. It was possible to upload a batch file, but most of the work got done with a worksheet, including uploading the data, retrieving it, and the running the validations and the approval was all done on the worksheet. That turned to be difficult to work with. We heard feedback that it was hard for you to use, and certainly it created a maintenance problem if we had to put out a new version for any reason. So this year we've tried to make it as much website-centric as possible and minimizing the amount of work you have to do on the worksheet. As a matter of fact, an institution or a state that is able to produce their batch file directly from their data system can do everything online and needn't deal with the Excel spreadsheet at all. So we're calling it an optional worksheet. It's retained because we know that not all of you have that ability to do that and need to do manual work to prepare the data. So the worksheet is still there to support that. But the way it works is last year the worksheet directly uploaded the data. This year the worksheet will produce a batch file so that all the data goes into the system through the batch file, and it gets uploaded and validated all in one step, and the review and approval work gets done online. So those are the changes, and I'm going to jump into the demo here. 1 second. Okay, and I believe you should now see the website. One thing I will caution at the beginning, I am demoing off of a demo site because we have test data set up on it. So if you are eyeballing the URL at the top of the page, that's incorrect. It's the same URL as last year, which is ccacollection.shio.org, that's unchanged, and you'll find it relatively easily. So I'm going to play the role of two different people today. One is Jane Operator. Jane is a member of the Institutional Research Department at an institution called Test Institution 1. And Test Institution 1 happens to be in a state called All-American Test State. So she's been delegated as an operator to do the preparation of the data for her institution. And she's fortunate because she has a very sophisticated data system and gets along well with her IT department, and they prepare the data for her. John Operator, on the other hand, works for the state agency, which is has less sophisticated data system and has to do most of his work on in the Excel worksheet. And so we'll walk through what the system looks like to these two individuals. So first I'm going to log in as Jane, and her username is janetc1.edu, Test College 1. And when she logs in, the menus become available to the resources that she has access to. Now the first thing that Jane needs to do is go to this home page and find the documents. She doesn't even need to log in to get to the documents, but she needs to sit down with her IT people to work together to prepare the data. So she'll, for example, download the technical guide, which has all the information about the metrics that Mike just discussed in a lot more detail, and be sure that's well understood. And she will need to have the file specifications document and share that with her IT department so they know how to prepare the data file for upload. And then she'll want to download the table of variable names, which gives her information about all of the variable names for each element and the components of those names, so she and her IT department can develop the data file. This is all very similar to last year, and the variable names are very comparable to last year with of course, changes for the new year and a few other detailed changes that are well documented in the document. And then there's a description of all the mnemonics that are used in the process, and a summary of the changes that were made this year with the skipping of a year. So all that information is available to her and her IT people at the website. Then, of course, she needs to download the user guide, which will tell her most of what I'm going to tell, or everything that I'm going to tell you today and more, and provide examples and details, including a pretty good section on what's changed. So for those of you who used the system last year, you'll find it easy to work through that document. After she's worked with the IT department and set up a schedule, and they come back to her promptly with the data prepared, then she needs to go to the file upload. So she has the IT department or whoever's prepared her file for her has created it, and she goes to this form. Here there's a choice of a 3-column format or a 2-column format. And for those of you from last year, remember we started out with a 2-column format. Well, we are now discouraging it. The workbook produces a 3-column format, And we encourage everybody to use the 3-column format that includes in each row the variable name, the value, and the org ID for which it is being uploaded. If you have written programs that produce the 2-column format, this version is still available. And if you use it, you'll be required to select the org ID that you're uploading for. And we found that to be sort of error-prone, so we're discouraging that. So she needs she's loaded that file produced to her by her IT department onto her computer, and she needs to go find it. We recommend that you keep your worksheets, if you're using workbooks, and your data files in a separate directory just for convenience. And so here she is. She's got Test College 1 all, that's all of the metrics, in her load file, and it's load number 1. Again, we have some recommendations in the book how to name the files, which I'm not following here. I find it convenient that Windows 7 will, depending on your browsers or your Explorer settings, will display the data so you can double check. And here you can see the format with the variable name, then the comma, and then the value for that variable, and then the comma, and the organization ID. In this case, it's Test College 1, which is AA001. So you can just, at the last minute, double confirm that you've got the right data. And then just click the upload button. Now this will take a few seconds. We're pretty confident that in general it will go pretty fast. And here I've uploaded 8,035 rows in 5 seconds. While it's been uploaded, it's also been validated, and that was work that you had to do separately in the spreadsheet last year. So that's already been done. And if you click on this View File Error Summary, you can look through it. Now I'll explain, there's 4 categories of errors. The first one, data submitted but not imported. Fortunately, Jane has no errors there. But this would be if the variable name didn't exist, it was misspelled, or if an unacceptable value was entered, a text value that's not allowed, or if Jane tried to upload data for an institution she didn't have authority for. Any of those kinds of errors would cause a summary of what those errors were, and those would not have been imported at all. It would have just been ignored except to report back to her. The next category is errors that are imported, but they're errors in the data. And she has 3 of those errors, and these particular errors all happen to be because the total number of people in the male and female categories was greater than the total, and so that is not allowable. And those errors will prevent approval of the data. Then there's a long list of warnings that may not be wrong, but are things that Jane would want to check on. For example, there's a situation where total time to degree for an associate seeker is averaging less than 2 years. That would be unusual, and it would be important for Jane to check on that to understand whether that's correct or whether there's some error in the data. Those errors, those warnings, would not prevent approval of that upload, but they're things for you to sort of double check your work. The last category is data suppression notices. Now, we're doing data suppression differently this year, and your state will want to follow your own policy on it, and there's some description of this in the document that you should probably look at. But in this case, if a value less than 10, or 10 or less, in this case less than 11, is entered, this is allowed, and it will stay there in the system until you approve the data, and then the system will automatically suppress that data. The advantage of that is that some states want institutions particularly to report those small values so that they can aggregate the data and use it as a state level, even though it might not, it shouldn't be reported at an institution level. So that's the way that works. Those will automatically be suppressed, and you don't have to suppress it yourself depending on your suppression policy. So we know she has 3 errors in the data. She has several different ways to look at it. One is the error summary report, which we are looking at. Another is the metric tables, and the metric tables allow her to, this is this table similar to what you saw in the spreadsheet last year. So for context 1, we take a look at the data, and you'll see that it's maybe not quite as pretty as a spreadsheet, but it displays the data for context 1, and that has no errors. The errors she had were, I think it was progress 5, if I recall. So we'll look at that data. The progress 5 metrics is the largest one. It takes a few seconds for that to refresh, so requires a little patience here. Browsers are different. I can see here that this one's still working because it shows it in the tab at the top of the page. And we're waiting. I'm filling time here. I think we will add to this a processing message so you know what's happening. So here is progress 5. This is a big table, so you have to move around in it. All of the light blue labels here are values that are less than 11 where suppression is needed. Again, you don't have to do anything here because that will happen when you approve it. The amber color are the warnings, and there's a lot of them in this particular data set. And the red color are the errors that really need to be fixed. So sure enough, here's the gender total, and if I click on it, I will get a pop-up that shows me what the error was, and you can see that before, but it actually shows the comparison, and the total here was 7456, but the male and female added together was 7457. So her IT department has made some kind of error, and so Jane's next step would be to go back to the IT department and say, here's the error. You cannot change data inside the website, and this is deliberate because we're following a philosophy that that error should be corrected at the source. There's either something wrong with the database or there's something wrong with the program that was written to extract the data from the database. But whatever that error is, if you don't fix it at the source, it will come up another time. So Jane goes back to her IT department, points out the error, they discover what's wrong with their accounting, and come back to her a week later with a new file, and she goes back to the file upload just like she did before, loads Test College 1 load 2, and clicks the upload button so that the correction of the data is done outside the system and hopefully at the source. So again, it loaded those rows. I'll check the error summary first thing, and they fixed it because now I have no errors. In the meantime, Jane probably would be checking out these warnings to be sure they're okay, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on that right now. Jane has the ability now to go through and check that all this data is correct, once she's gotten past the errors. The metrics table is her primary source of how she's going to validate the data. And we're going to take a look at outcome 4 just for fun here and look at some of these warnings. Now, this one has a total time to degree that is less than for part-time students than it is for full-time students, and that's a sort of a suspicious data element. I don't know what the reason is, but we're going to assume the Test College 1 has a good reason for that. So she's going to click on the edit comment for this and explain, whoops, I can't spell, the good reason. For that particular warning. And that's useful for your use in the future, and it's also used for analysts reviewing the data. And so she'll save the comment, and it's not very big, but you can see that the comment appears right here on the top of the table. and it shows who made the comment on the date, and that's all there is to it. Now, another piece of reviewing the data, under data management, is the approval status. And as an operator, you don't have access to the approval buttons. The approvers would have a button here that says they can approve or unapprove a particular metric. But as an operator, there's quite a bit of information here, including the number of errors, number of warnings, and the number of data suppression notices. We call them notices because they're not technically errors at this point, and whether or not that metric has been reviewed. So we can't really tell if it's been reviewed, but the system will tell you if it's been looked at. So here, Jane just looked at it, and it shows that information there, which is available to the approver to know who reviewed it last. The other thing you can do is switch back and forth between this page and the table page. So for instance, if I go over to the metric name and click on it, it takes me to the table presentation of that same information. And if I want to go back to the approval status, I click on that and it takes me back here. So where I have, for instance, I want to look at these errors or warnings and suppressions here, I can click on this. We know that Progress 5 takes a little longer, but it came up pretty quickly, and I can review it and then go back to the approval status. So I'm satisfied that there are no errors here, that the warnings are all accounted for, and I'm not going to worry right now about these because I know they'll be suppressed. And so Jane's next step is to turn it over to her boss, who will then deal with it. And I think we have enough time, so I'm going to log off as Jane, and I'm going to log back on JB Keyholder, and play the role of Jane's boss for a minute. And I'm going to go to the same approval status table, and you can see there are approval buttons. Now, I'm not looking at the right data, so I need to go to Test College 1. And here I can see that there's no errors, there's no warnings, there's no notices, that Jane has reviewed this. I trust Jane. I think she's really good at what she does. But I'm going to look at this anyway. The approver can go over and look at the actual data, go back over here and say, looks good to me, and click Approve, and that's all there is to it. So for those of you who are approvers on the phone, last year, approval was a fairly big process. One thing we are encouraging by creating the logins with different access is that you not give away your credentials. It is, in our case, it's less concern that somebody evil is going to do something bad, but it's important to know who did something. So here the record is kept, who last reviewed this and who approved it, and down here it shows that Jane last reviewed it. So if I approve this, it will show that Jane reviewed it and I approved it. It's a record of who did it and when it was done, and that's often important in tracking down mistakes or trying to figure out what happened. You can also easily unapprove. We decided unapprove wasn't a word, so it's undo your approval if you approve something and discover that there's still something to fix, and so you can do that. But at the end of the collection period, all that stuff needs to be improved. So that's the story from Jane's perspective.
John?
Yes.
We have one question. Can I jump in and ask it?
Please do, yes.
So we have a question from somebody who wants to know if you can still upload comments using the batch file.
No, you cannot upload comments to the batch file. The technical reason is that that feature last year caused huge performance problems, and some of you who recall sitting there for seemingly it wasn't hours, but a long time waiting for your batch to upload. It was because of that feature. So comments are done on the website, and they're done per metric. Now, if you have the same comment to repeat, you can obviously cut and paste your comments, but that's the way that works. Any other questions while we're stopped? All right, so I'm going to log off here, and I'm now going to log on as John at aa.gov. This is our operator at the All-American State. Nice to be able to make up a new state when you want it. He sees the same thing that the other operator saw, that Jane saw, but he has different challenges. Now, since he doesn't have either a major data center or an IT department to produce his files, he needs to do it the way, the old-fashioned way, if you will. So he goes to the spreadsheet, which looks very much like last year's. We will ultimately have a spreadsheet for you to view and make corrections if necessary to last year's data, but it's a different color, so please be sure you're using the green colored spreadsheet. He knows that Jane has finished her work, so in order to provide data for his input, he's going to start out by getting a hold of Jane's data. So we're going to log on here. And because he has authority to see Jane's data because of the access he's been given, he's able to retrieve Jane's workbook. And the menu here has 4 options. 2 of them are output options. You can create a batch file, either from the entire workbook or from this particular worksheet, or you can retrieve. In this case, he wants to retrieve Jane's work in order to build his statewide data. So he clicks the retrieve the workbook, and then he waits a few seconds, we hope, and it will go out and get that data from the database and bring it back into the workbook. Now, anybody can do that for data you have access to. So if there's reason to bring it back into the worksheet, even if you produced it on a worksheet but you lost the worksheet or messed it up, you can do that. The worksheet this year is not locked, and that's deliberate to give you more flexibility in how you use the data. So here, John has all of Jane's institutional data, and it says here AA001 Test College 1. And he can use this in his own analysis. He can cut and paste. He can modify the workbook. He can do whatever he wants. If you modify the workbook, however, then the ability to produce batch files from it might be corrupted. So you just need to be aware. You can always download a fresh workbook and start fresh. But he now has Jane's data, and he can use that to build his statewide database. So he goes off and works, I'm not going to save that. He works for a while working on preparing his own data, and eventually he has it, and I'm going to find it here. So we have, here's his state workbook that he's been working on for weeks. And he's got all his state data in it, and he's got it for all of the metrics. And that looks familiar to those of you who did this last year. Now he needs to create a batch file. So he does the same thing here. Interestingly, we don't require a password to produce a batch file because there's no security issue here. You're just creating a file on your own hard drive. So you could put in the password or not. But in this case, he wants to create a batch file from the entire workbook. Here's a caution we pop up that says this function assumes that all of the sheets are for the same organization. It is possible to have data for different institutions on different pages, and we don't recommend it, but here's a warning that says I'm going to produce a file, and every row in that file is going to be for institution ID AA. And so this proceeds. We also recommend that you develop a set of standard naming conventions for your files so you can keep them straight. Our suggestion, you don't have to follow, is in the user manual, and I'm not following it for today's purposes, but I'm just going to save it overwriting a file that already exists. It cautions me, and I say okay. And it also warns me here that says creating this file is not updating the database, and that's kind of for those of us that worked on it last year who assumed it was going to update the database, and this does not. It just creates the file. So now I need to go back over to the website and upload that file. So I'm still logged in as John at AA. And I go to the file upload page. I go find my file, and here it is, state upload 1. If you care to look at it, it looks like the right data, and the org ID is AA for all of those. My naming conventions are good. I shouldn't have to worry about it. And I'll upload that, and this is all of the state data that I'm receiving, and it uploaded in 5 seconds and ran all the validations. I do like Jane did. I go to my validation thing. I see, aha, I've got some errors, and I didn't expect to have errors because I thought I had it perfect. Of course, we very seldom do, but I want to go find out right away what those errors are. I can go back now, since I produced it from my workbook, to see what happened, and I look at this, and sure enough, I've left out 3 values, and since I left out totals, I produced those errors. I've got a couple of choices now here. Probably the easiest would be just to type the values in here, re-extract the file, and upload it, and there's nothing wrong with that approach, but just to be difficult here, I'm going to do another option just so you get a chance to see it. So I'm going to close that file. I'm going to open a new one. I'm going to open up a blank workbook, which is a copy of the original, and I'm going to just put in those values, nothing else, in this workbook. So I happen to have them here. They were 36,578 and 38,720 and 2265, or excuse me, 2665. And now I can create a batch file with this workbook. I still need to put in my name. And the reason it requires it to do this is because it needs to validate that you're entering a valid state agency. So I'm doing it for the state. This time I'm going to create the batch from just the worksheet, although it turns out it would produce the same file either way. And I'm going to call it upload 2. Save it. I get the same cautions. And now when I go back to the website and go to the file upload, I'm going to select that file. And it's worth noting here, and there's a reason I demonstrated this, is I only put in 3 values, and the other values in the sheet were empty. And I'm only getting the 3 rows. So if you don't have values, an empty value is not the same as 0. So please do not report 0 for data you don't have. If you have the data and it's 0, then report 0. But if you just don't have the data, don't report it, and it won't go into the system. So I'm going to upload this. turns out it takes just as long to do 3 records. Well, no, it was pretty quick. I guess it didn't take just as long. And I do my error summary. The error summary is still on the whole state data collection, but I got rid of those errors that I wanted. And assuming that everything else is checked out and the warnings are appropriate and I put in all the comments I need to, I'm ready to turn this project over to my boss. So that's a quick overview of how the system looks to the operator. In the introductory section, it said operators can I forget exactly, view data and upload data. Operators, I'm sure, are assigned also to validate and correct and check and put in comments and do all that kind of hard work to make it successful, and all of that can be done from the system.
The slide that you have in front of you is the CCA customer service details. And I know that last year we had some challenges with the voicemail box, but those have all been addressed. When you call into the CCA customer support line, Angela Sanchez will be your first point of contact, and she'll take care of getting you where you need to go. I'll do what I did last year and continue to answer questions around metrics content, validation, do troubleshooting to help make sure that you can use the system. And if we run into major technical issues, then John or Chris will be your contact for addressing those. So if questions do come up, as I'm sure they will throughout the process, we really look forward to working with you on those and addressing your needs as your individual needs and making this process hopefully easy and painless, or as easy and painless as it can be. So thank you all again for being here today, and we look forward to working with you.